The hinge, yes, but not the way people mean it. Inner Speaker was a guitar record made by someone who'd never stopped being a teenager. Currents was a pop record made by someone pretending he had. Lonerism is the one where you can hear him actually deciding, in real time, whether the guitar was restraining him or protecting him. That question mark, it's what makes the record matter. Once he answers it on Currents, he's just executing. Here he's still fighting with himself about whether execution is even the job.
When you're the only person making the call on every balance, you don't get pushed. You keep your first instinct or second guess it into the ground with no one in the room saying play the next one. That's not the same record as two people arguing in a control room.
Okay, so I came in wanting that right. The title's sitting right there. Perth's literally one of the most isolated cities on Earth. And I thought I was gonna hear what that sounds like when it's actual place loneliness, not just a vibe you can get in any bedroom in Brooklyn. But it feels like the record's lonely in the way being alone in a crowded room is lonely, and I needed it to be the other kind, the kind where you're actually gone, and I'm not sure I'm hearing that yet.
The isolation isn't loneliness confessed. It's loneliness as material, as texture, as the room itself. Perth's far enough away that Parker and Pond weren't riffing on New York bedroom pop syntax. They were building their own vocabulary out of haze and distance. The record doesn't want you inside his diary. It wants you inside the fog. Two different architectures of intimacy, and the second one requires you to surrender the assumption that you're owed the confessional first.
That's not an accident, that hiss. You cut lacquer, press a vinyl master. You keep the pops and the surface noise because they're part of what the needle's reading. You don't sand them out pretending they're a mistake. He's doing the same thing with the field recordings. The texture is the point.
Okay, but I hear the shimmer on feels like we only go backwards. I do. It's genuinely pretty. The guitar's doing this thing where it's like looking at something through water. And I get that it's there, fine. But pretty sitting by itself isn't saying anything to me. And I need it to say something, or at least I need to feel like I'm inside the room instead of standing outside it looking in through the glass.
That haze she's describing, that shimmer that already feels pre-inhabited. That's the exact problem library music composers were solving first. Library music, the stuff written on spec for film and TV, mood built to be felt and never noticed, isn't footnote because it solves a real problem. How do you make synthetic texture feel inhabited, lived in, like something's already happened in the room before the song starts? Those catalog composers had to build mood from almost nothing, just oscillators and tape loops. Raw electronic tones and spliced recorded fragments, the only tools they had. And they built it deliberately, not by accident. Parker's listening to that solution. Whether he's listening to an actual record or just to records that listened to those records is a distinction for liner notes, not for what his ears were after.
She's describing what it sounds like. That's not the same as what he built from.
The lawyer's distinction is real in a contract, not in a room. A record sounds like something. It triggers a lineage the moment it lands in an ear that knows the lineage exists. Whether Parker had the library music cue sheets on his turntable or absorbed them through the culture's water table doesn't change what lonerism is doing sonically. It resolves into that texture. The architecture announces itself whether or not the architect can name his influences, and frankly, most can't. They just built the thing their ear demanded. The descriptive accuracy matters.
Y'all, I looked that up. He was producing Melody Prochet's record in Paris at the same time, and I kept waiting for that context to unlatch something in Lonerism, like okay, he's in this other person's creative space. They're in the same room making something together. Maybe that bleeds into the haze and it gets less lonely or it gets a different kind of lonely. But it just doesn't. The backstory sits next to the album like a photograph next to a closed door, and the door doesn't open.
He's treating the voice like it's got to earn the same space in the mix as the drums, the same headroom, the same right to sit up front. That's a choice. Whether the drums deserved it more than the words did, that's where I'd push back.
Y'all, that's exactly it. But those vocals next to Robin Pecknold, and you feel the difference between a voice that wants to be heard and a voice that's chosen to hide. I'm not saying Parker should be Pecknold, but I need to know what the hiding's for.
The loneliness isn't in what he's saying. It's in the fact that you can't quite reach him to hear it. That's the record's actual architecture. You're allowed to find that frustrating. You're not allowed to call it a mistake.
The intent's clear enough. Whether it lands is a different question. Plenty of deliberate choices don't, and I'm not ready to say this one does.
Y'all, I've asked around. Like actually asked people. And it's not just one person saying, oh, I don't listen to it anymore. It's this thing where they'll tell me they wore it out in 2012, played it constantly, and now they maybe spin Elephant if it comes up, but that's it. And I keep wondering if the record got smaller, or if we moved somewhere it couldn't follow, which, I don't know, maybe that matters and maybe it doesn't, but it feels like something to name.
It won the ARIA that year, got the Grammy nod, sure, fine, but here's what's actually happening. Currents didn't just outshine Lonerism, it replaced it. Parker spent 3 years turning the diffuse prettiness into something you could sell, something with shape, with a commercial spine, and the audience followed him there like it was obvious. That's not Lonerism getting thinner with age. That's Lonerism getting cannibalized by its own successor, which is a different animal entirely. And you're reading the corpse's quietness as a symptom of the original illness, when really it's just what happens when a record gives you the impulse, and then the artist hands you the perfected version 3 years later. Of course, people stopped returning. They didn't need to.
Currents worked because it had weight to it, didn't it? This one's thin by design, but I'm not sure thin survives when the thicker version of the same idea comes out 3 years on. The question is whether there's something underneath the thinness here that actually holds, or whether it's just less.
Y'all, I'm not saying that's wrong, but when I put on Mind Mischief, I can ride it the whole way through and something happens, like something ambient and pleasant just happens to me, and then I'm supposed to remember it and I can't. There's no handhold, and that's different from Sam Beam's lines in The Shepherd's Dog. Those stick in your ribs for days. I know that's not what Parker was after, I get that, but the glow fades and nothing stays behind, and I need something to stay behind.
He's hearing compression as absence of friction. She's hearing absence as withholding. And they're both right, which is precisely the problem. A choice to dissolve isn't automatically braver than a choice to declare. It's just quieter. Quiet can do a lot of work, but it can't do everything, and Parker knows this, which is why the record keeps circling back to the question without ever quite answering it.
One man in a room, you get one pass at every decision. No one to push back, no one to say hold on, that seam's showing. So the seams don't show because they were never made. That's compression, right enough, not the kind you can meter on a mixing board, but the kind where every rough edge gets smoothed before it leaves the room. Whether that's a feature or a limit, he's still figuring it out, I reckon.
But friction inside the material isn't the same as friction that gets heard. It's the difference between what happened in the room and what made it onto tape. If Parker was wrestling with the arrangement on Apocalypse Dreams, the wrestling is invisible. What we're listening to is the sediment it left behind. The song doesn't sound unplanned. It sounds like the plan got revised quietly, which is exactly the constraint the engineer just described. No argument, no seams, one take becoming doctrine. You can hear the direction shift. You cannot hear him decide to shift it, and that's the entire problem.
Okay, so Apocalypse Dreams. I've listened to it maybe 40 times this week, right? And yes, the arrangement does shift. The strings come in different. The whole thing opens up around 4 minutes, and I hear what you're saying, I do. But it still feels like it's happening inside the haze, like he's moving the furniture around in a room that's already underwater. The record keeps pulling everything back into the wash. And that's fine, that's the whole aesthetic, I get it. But there's no moment where I feel the haze actually crack, where something breaks through and doesn't get smoothed back in. It's all diffusion. And I need to feel something cut through, just once.
A trade source listing it alongside those records doesn't tell you Parker heard them. Tells you someone squinting at the finished thing thought they heard an echo. That's not the same as the thing it came from doing the work.
You're asking him to prove the lineage matters by watching the record survive without it, fine. But that's not how texture works as a strategy. Library music doesn't apologize for being furniture. It is the point. Parker knows this. He's not failing to be Fleet Foxes. He's succeeding at something else entirely, which means your test, does it hold up to listeners who arrive blank, is the wrong test for this particular record. You're measuring the wrong thing and calling it a shortfall. The thing is the 100 in the hands. A New York duo doing that same layered synthpop haze at the same moment. Does the same texture work and arrives as itself anyway, they're not interchangeable. And that's the difference I was papering over. Parker chose texture over the legibility that would let strangers hear what he'd made. That's a choice, and I was calling it vision when it was actually a cost I wasn't paying.
She just called it pleasant, and yeah. That's what's sitting in my chest about it.
The dictaphone's there. You can hear the field recordings, the room caught on tape. The phasing stacks clean, that shimmer where two signals just slightly out of step blur into each other. And yeah, the record's built tight. You can hear he didn't phone it in, didn't cut corners on the assembly. That's honest work. Doesn't mean it adds up to something the room remembers once it's off.
Okay, so I'm not asking for the record to break itself open. I'm not asking for some big vulnerable moment where Kevin Parker decides to feel something. I just need one place where the haze does something other than haze, where it's not just texture covering up the fact that there's nothing underneath. And Sun's Coming Up gets closest, right? It's almost there. It's the last track, it's got room to breathe, and then it just kind of dissolves before you can actually land in it. And I'm sitting there going, well, that's the whole album, isn't it? That's the shape of it. Beautiful clouds, and you're reaching for solid ground, and your hand goes through.
I say the real thing. Is anyone willing to name what it means that a record this well constructed has almost nothing to hold once the sound stops?
It's not that the record has to grab. It's that nothing in it is shaped to land anywhere. You can float through it fine. Just don't expect the room to catch you when you come down.
Yeah, and I came in here wanting to hate it for real reasons, like actually hate it. And instead, I got to hate it because of what it's doing, not just because it feels thin when I sit with it. It's the record people say they used to like more, the one that landed hard in 2012 and got quieter on the shelf every year since. And I think I finally know why that happened instead of just feeling mad about it.
The hinge metaphor wants a clean moment. There, the turn happened. But hinges work both ways, and what I'm hearing is less a pivot than a door left open. Inner speaker trusted guitars to carry the weight. Lonerism disperses that weight across everything but guitars, and currents will come along and say guitars were the problem all along. Parker spent 3 years in a room proving texture could do the work, and then abandoned the thesis. That's not a hinge. That's a test he failed to believe in.
Textbook transitional artifact. Parker builds a hermetic sonic world. Layered psychedelia, field-recorded grain, a real library music bloodline running through the synthesis. And the craft holds. The compression sits right. But compression of feeling is the problem. Lush production as substitute for lyric depth, atmosphere standing where a voice should stand. Loved on arrival, faded on return. Both true. Outpaced by records that had the same sonic ambition and also had something to say. 65.
When one person's stacking all the parts, there's no argument left in the room. You can hear what he decided. You can't hear what he didn't want to hear.
Okay, wait, but that's exactly. Like he's in Perth making a record about being completely alone, and it comes out sounding like he's never been rattled by anything, ever. There's no wear on it. A record that lonely should have calluses should sound like it's been sat with, and instead it's just smooth, buffed. And I kept waiting for something to snag, some rough edge where the feeling actually lives, and it never came, and that's why I couldn't stay in it.
The genre write-ups file it under Dream Pop. Rate the 100 in the hands above it on the same shelf. But that's the tell, isn't it? I gave it 82 because the thing is built. I play it once every 2 years because the thing doesn't need me there. The 100 in the hands demands you watch it happen. This one just wants to be the room.
The 100 in the hands wanted you to hear the seams. Parker didn't want seams at all. Wanted the thing to sit in the room like it had always been there. That's not execution. That's two different jobs.
The 100 in the hands wanted witnesses. Parker wanted to be the room itself. Not the person in it, the air, the walls, the thing that doesn't require you to look at it to know it's there. You can't grade those on the same curve, and I've been doing it anyway. That's the gap between 82 and what I actually played.
Y'all, I went looking for somebody in there and found rooms instead. Feels like we only go backwards is just a room. Mind Mischief is just a room. Sun's Coming Up is definitely just a room, and I can name the rooms now, which is something, which is maybe even enough, but it's not the same as finding a person, and I need you to know I'm not pretending it is.
Buried's not the same as lost. They're in the wash because that's where they want to sit. Question is whether you can find them there, or whether the wash itself is the point, and the voice is just another layer of it. Won't know till someone listens different.